Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
We're likely going to revisit this probably a dozen times over the next year or so. But I want to talk today briefly about rhetoric. Rhetoric as a concept is, for those of you that may not remember your degrees really well or not done the research yet, rhetoric is the idea to, or the ability to convey information in a way that stimulates productive argument. Now, what's productive argument? Productive argument is a difference of opinion between two people, or a difference of understanding between two people that aims to convince or persuade. Now, rhetoric itself isn't necessarily persuasive per se. Sometimes the anticipated effect is to evoke or create an emotional response or prompt a emotional state. So when we talk about rhetoric in the context of perspectives through which we can view the problems in our life, what you're really looking for is in the communication itself, in the ways we're being communicated to and the ways we're communicating with the world. What are you looking at in terms of the intended emotional, intellectual, and conceptual response? So when coupled with the other liberal arts like logic and grammar, you really get the ability to sort of filter information in a meaningful way. But for the context of just focusing on rhetoric as a concept, it's a performative function. So even in writing, even in all of the kind of places that human beings communicate, there is a element of understanding the structural flow of information beyond simply the grammar, right? So grammar, we talked about syntax and how those pieces might fit together. We're going to talk more about grammar as well, but when we talk about rhetoric, we're really talking specifically about what is the best way to stage concepts, outcomes, or stage concepts to create the outcomes we're looking for. So when we look at, say, a specific situation in your life, there's almost always a communications function attached to that. You're always being communicated to in some way or another. Those rhetorical systems that are communicating with you are oftentimes subconscious. They're your own biases, for example, screening only the words that you relate to or don't relate to. There is a sort of rhetorical analysis function that you go through when you're looking at the doom scroll forever and ever, right? So when you're sitting there scrolling through your phone, there is that's all rhetoric. That is all people trying to evoke a certain type of response, a buying decision, a subtle enragement, a slow boil towards some level of action. When we start to look at these things, you have to understand as well that you're responsible for creating some of this. So things like the algorithm, which mirror your behavior or mirror your preferences, are only half responsible for the mirroring effect, right? So as you're considering rhetoric, as you're kind of laying the symbols out on the table and doing your work, think about those modalities, those design intents in the way you're communicating or the way you're being communicated with, or the preconceived biases you have as you perceive communications, even from the natural world. Things, for example, you may, there are biases in the psychological space around things like if you buy a red car, for example, you're going to be hyper aware of red cars in the future because you now have that bias. There are simple things like, for me, getting personal for a second, I really hate squirrels because they are just a nuisance. And One of the things that I notice the moment I go outside, particularly, in my suburban environment, is squirrels. I see squirrels everywhere, and they are annoying to me. And because I look for them, I find them. Now, we can get more into that. That's a 3 knocks problem. But when you start to look at rhetoric as a concept, again, it really does transcend, strictly speaking, the spoken word, the written word, even body language. There's a lot more going on with rhetoric, and some of that is projected from your own consciousness. So as you start working with this, begin to look a little bit more about the messages you're receiving. Rhetoric is really almost subtle, or a one-for-one swap for communication. So with that, we'll see you next time.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at masonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.